Doing your best work, it is so important. It's something I think about on a regular basis and really want to share my reflections on this because to me, when I have weeks and months where I'm unquestionably doing the best work I've done in my career, it is such a difference in my life, mentally, emotionally. It bleeds into personal life. It makes such a big difference that I really want to share that because when I have weeks and months where I feel like I'm bored or I'm stagnating or I'm unhappy, it's work can be excruciating. But then on the other hand, work can be the most fun and enjoyable part of my day when programming. So here's what I've learned. Here are my thoughts on productivity and uh, doing your best work. So, what do I even mean by productivity? And when people say productivity, sure, you can measure velocity in tools like Pivotal Tracker and Linear, and maybe Jira has something like that too. But I'm not talking about that kind of productivity, right? That kind of productivity is some like kind of gross capitalist mindset of like, okay, if a person's in a factory and they can pull a lever 100 times an hour, so then they can do 800 pulls a day, and then we can scale up the factory and get this much more work done, and that then means, more profits, and we can grow and do all these things, right? I think that's this like traditional view of productivity, and I think in some ways the tooling is mirroring that by trying to measure velocity and like the rate of work that gets done, and then it tries to mirror that with like sizing stories and estimating them. While it is helpful to know like if a task you're taking on is extra large or small or however many points, whatever system you use, I think that's not what I'm talking about. I like generally don't care about that stuff. I think it's a way for like people whose job isn't to build things to like feel like they have some control or have some ability to do projections. And I feel a little more like woo woo, hand wavy sparkles about it, which is like if everyone is doing their best work, there will be momentum and things will move forward. And the important things will get done, with that focus, but it's about people feeling good. And to me, productivity is about a feeling. It's about the feeling when you're doing the work. It's about the feeling when your workday is over. And it's when you reach the end of the day, you can't believe that 8 hours have gone by. You're excited. You know exactly what your next step is to do, and you can hit pause and pick it up in the morning. There's this Ernest Hemingway quote that the best time to stop writing is, when you know what you're going to write, your next sentence is going to be the next day, so that you can just pick up and not have to figure out where you were. And the quote's something like that. But I really like that quote. I think I try to do that with programming, where like if at the end of the day, I want to know what I'm going to do first thing the next morning to pick up where I left off. And that's a really good feeling. And my goal with productivity and my goal with doing my best work isn't about how many lever pulls, how many points of stories can I deliver, but it's about having good days. And how many good days can I have in a row? And are most days good days? Are most days in a month good? Is it a good week, good month? And if a majority of days are good and I'm enjoying myself, I'm having fun, I'm learning things, I'm challenged, that to me is like doing my best work and feeling productive. So to me, it's more about a feeling. It's not something that can easily be measured, but it's also a phrase that people are familiar with. So that's how I think about it. And I care about being productive for my personal well-being. Like I said, it makes a huge difference on how you feel, how I feel like if I have a good day doing something I care about and I'm passionate about, then I can be my best self, throughout the rest of my life. And I that's how I want to feel. If we're spending a majority of our weeks working, I want to enjoy that and feel good about that work. And I think that's good for my mental health and my emotional health. And I think it's really important for my growth as a programmer and my career growth. So if you're just doing the same old work, then like it gets boring and you kind of hit this plateau. And I think about this a lot, like why I love programming, and it's because it's so deep. It's not like you go to school and you learn accounting. I don't know anything about accounting, but it's not like you learn how to do a thing and then you know it and then you just do it for 40 years and then you retire. Like, whether you've been doing it for 5 years or 15 years, there's so much to learn. There's so much depth and there's so much breadth of things you could focus on and dig into that to keep learning and growing is what motivates me to show up and try to do my best work. The number one thing for doing your best work is having focus. That is just absolutely the thing I have noticed with people I've worked with myself, even outside of programming. It's just so important because we live in this age of distraction where there are a million things vying for our attention, whether it's our phones or different websites or teammates and coworkers in Slack or whatever it is, right? And focus is, I think, the superpower of the 21st century because that, I think it already is and will continue to be the differentiator between the people who are enjoying their work and doing their best work and really thriving and people who are struggling and having a hard time in terms of like knowledge work and doing work where it's not physical labor, but you're doing mental labor. And I think to achieve that sort of focus, it's not about life hacks. It's not about, quick fixes or changes or trying something for a week and because, you saw about it, or heard about it. It's truly about changing your behaviors and your patterns and your habits, right? Your patterns and behaviors are your habits, and then your systems. So just how you think about your work and how you go about it. And there are different techniques and methodologies that you can use for this, but to me, it's not about this like quick change or this one little thing that'll make you more productive. I don't think any of that stuff all seems like snake oil salesmen, right? Because really, tools and techniques and those are what matters is what's inside of you and how you're approaching it and how you spend your time. That's ultimately what it comes down to. So I don't really have many like hacks, but I have thoughts and I can share what I do and my systems and resources. So what I want you to do is reflect on last week. How did last week go? How did you feel? Did you enjoy most days of your working job as a developer? Were you frustrated? Were you defeated? Did you have fun? Were you frazzled? Like, think about how last week was, and does that encapsulate most weeks, or was that an unusually bad week, which those happen? But yeah, I want to reflect on it, because that, I think, will help you have the lens through the rest of what I have to say. For me, I'm working on a new project at work that is challenging. It's fun. I'm having to dig a lot more into TypeScript and testing with TypeScript, and really flexing like front-end architectural skills. So it's challenging, but it's also fun, and most days are very good days. So that was my last week, and I want everyone to have those kinds of weeks as much as they can. So the first thing is you have to eliminate distractions. This is like the number one biggest thing for doing your best work is have time to do focused work every single day. That is, and block it out. Like, put it in your calendar if you need to, right? When you're building a habit or changing a behavior, like I will put this in my calendar for 4 hours with a notification that pops up that just says focused work, and that prevents other people from scheduling meetings during that time. It signals that you don't want distractions, and then do that work for however long that is. So things to do during that time, right, is to close social media, silence your phone, turn off notifications, quit Slack and Discord. It can feel really weird quitting Slack and quitting Discord, like closing the applications, because I think when you work remotely, it's like, feels like your lifeline that signals, oh, I'm online, I'm available, I'm working, I'm butts in seat, I'm here. But you know what? You need to remove that notion, because that is not the metric that matters to your employers or to and if it does matter to them, then that's a bigger issue and a different problem to talk about. But what matters is the work that you produce, and I think doing good work and being a good teammate and collaborating. But I think ultimately what people are looking for is what's being produced. And the best way to produce your best work is to have focus time. Hide your phone, put it in a drawer, put it in a different room. Like, I really, the phone, chat program, social media, they are the like ultimate distractants. Because if you're in the zone and you're focused and you're doing deep work and then your phone goes off, it just pulls you out of it and you lose your train of thought and it's hard to pick back up. When you're in the flow, and coding almost feels athletic, where you're like jumping through, writing things out, it's coming out, you're flowing. You don't want interruptions. It makes it so hard to get back in the groove. So try these things. If you're worried about, like, especially if you have like kids or a family member or a friend or something and you need to be reachable, set up a focus. On iPhone and macOS, there's a thing called Focus where you can let through certain people. So I have a work focus, and it lets my wife be able to text or call me, and she knows like I'm working, so it's only for things where she really needs me, or my parents or whatever, my brother. It's only certain things and certain apps can come through. So you need to set up those boundaries yourself. And setting up those boundaries, that can be putting up a Slack status that says deep work time or focus time, and snooze your notifications or whatever, right? And maybe you pick a time where you need to be less available on those programs. Like maybe it's in the early morning, like when your day starts, if you're East Coast and everyone else is mountain time, or maybe it's towards the end of the day when it's quiet. But find that time and respect it. And in terms of focus in your environment, if you're in an office, see if you can like follow the headphone rule, which is if you have your headphones on, then don't interrupt me, or maybe have like some sort of sign. I haven't worked in an office too much, so I can't speak to that a lot. But and then in terms of your like home environment, if you can, find a dedicated room to do your work. It makes a huge difference with a place where you can close the door. I know that's not always possible, and especially with space constraints and where people live, but if you can have a room where you can close the door and signify to your family or whomever you live with that this is focus time, it makes a huge difference. You need to guard your time too, and you need to be intentional with meetings. You can really fall into a trap where you're like spending 4 or 5 hours a day in meetings. And unless you're a manager or a person whose job is primarily meeting with people and supporting them, like too many meetings are exhausting, they're not fun, but they can be necessary at times. So it's not that there shouldn't be any meetings, but you need to be really intentional, and you need to understand if there are meetings that you cannot attend. And if you cannot attend them, reply maybe to the calendar invite, or only go when you have to. But just beware of meetings. But when you're doing your work, you need a system. That's been the biggest change in the last few years. Before, I didn't really have a system. I was able to have these times of focus, but I wasn't consistent. And I think for consistency, a system really helps. I follow this system called Getting Things Done. It's also GTD for short, which is a huge concept, and I am interested in making like a video or presentation on GTD for developers, because I think there's a specific lens you can view it through to apply it to development work. But for now, I'll just briefly share my system. Getting things done is important. More on that later. But you need a system, and your system is what you do every day and every week as these patterns, and what you do with new tasks and new information and how you organize it. So here's my general system for doing work. One is I study every day programming. I start my workday with it, whether it's 10 minutes or 30 minutes or an hour. It doesn't matter how long it is, really. It's just about getting in this pattern, right? This habit of, I want to learn something new every day related to my craft. That can be reading, screencasts, videos like this. It can be interactive programs. It can be working on a small personal project. Whatever it is, I make time to study every day. It's so important. And it's just like if you were learning a musical instrument. I've been learning a guitar over the last 4 months, and I try every day to make time to practice my scales, chords, play songs, and have fun with it, right? And then I see myself getting better and better. And even if I can only do it for 10 minutes that day, it's really important that I do it every day. I do the same with programming, even if I've been programming for over 15 years. So the daily study is really important. Second is I do this thing called a weekly review, where I go and I review everything on my plate, everything on my mind related to my work. So the things I review are all of my tasks. We use a system called Linear at my job. which is kind of like Pivotal Tracker and Jira where you track issues. I review all of the issues assigned to me and make sure that they're still relevant, make sure that I have enough information to do them, and kind of pull out the ones that I'm going to try to accomplish that week. I review all the notes that I've taken. All of the notes I've taken through all of my time working where I work. And if it's a note that is relevant to the team, then I migrate it to our internal document system. If it's a note that's relevant to me, I keep it there and or I archive it if it's no longer relevant. But these are like relevant notes that I care about that mean something. And I don't necessarily read through the whole thing, but I just go through them and see, oh yeah, I need to do this or that. So my notebook becomes this really important place, which I'll show you about. I review my calendar so I know what's going on this week, and if there's a holiday or a vacation day, I make sure I respond to my calendars and calendar events and have an accurate representation of my calendar. That's really important. I review my GitHub pull requests. Now, that's just like, I make sure if I have an outstanding pull request that I have yet to finish, that I go and make sure I finish it. So it's not that I only review pull requests once a week. It's that I go and check and make sure I have no lingering pull requests that I've created or been asked to review, just as a fail-safe. And there are a couple other things I review, but that basically sums it up. It's like I try to review everything relating to my work. Every Monday, it's how I start my week. Third, I capture every piece of work in one place. So when I have something I need to do, it goes in linear. And that's it. Sometimes there might be, I guess there's an asterisk there, where just sometimes it's not like a task that's appropriate for the company tracking. Like maybe it's like, oh, I want to submit an expense report for something. Well, that doesn't go in linear. But any like piece of like development work goes in linear, no matter how trivial, even if it's a chore, whatever, goes in linear. Linear is where I go for my programming work. And then I guess I should say for like non-programming work at my job, that goes into OmniFocus, which is a to-do tracker, similar to Things and Todoist. And so I guess there's two there. It's not as simple as I said, but I have an OmniFocus list for work, and then I have all development stuff goes in linear. And sometimes OmniFocus tasks translate, I migrate them to linear, sometimes notes migrate to linear, but I make sure I capture everything and write it down. Nothing that I need to do lives in my head. That is, I don't want to have to remember things. I want to have a system where I can look at the things I need to do and then trust that system. So that's where the weekly review comes in play. You capture things and then you review them and make sure they're the right things you're doing. 4, I break my work down into as small pieces as I can. I'll show you more on that soon. 5 is I live by my calendar and my task list. I review them, I trust them. They are what is, how I spend my time. And I use notifications for them to know what I need to do. So if I'm like in focus time and then, I have a meeting coming up, a notification pops up that says, you have a meeting in 10 minutes or an hour or tomorrow or whatever I set it to be. And then that lets me know, okay, it's time to prepare for that. So live by the calendar, live by the task list. Because I don't want to manage those two things or remember those two things. I'm really bad at remembering those two things, but I'm really good at programming, I think. So I want to optimize for being good at programming, right? And keep getting better there. 6 is I try to have at least 4 daily hours of focus time, and that goes back to that blocking it out and making sure I have that time. If I have days where I don't do 4 hours of programming for my job, then it's that's a bad day. Maybe I was in meetings or whatever happened, but that's a sign of there's something wrong. If I can't do at least 4 hours, hopefully it's more. Hopefully it's six hours. That's a nice amount between meetings and organizing the work and stuff. But that's my system broadly. There's more to that. That'd be a separate video, but let's keep going on doing your best work. So breaking down your tasks and breaking down your work into small tasks. I don't know if this is obvious, but whatever tool you're tracking work in at work, whether it's Pivotal or Linear or Jira or whatever, is I break things down into really small tasks. I mean trivial tasks, because I don't want to forget them. It's just for me. No one sees these. No one cares about these. They can see them if they want, and it sort of shows, all these things were accounted for, which is nice, but it's really important I break it down. Here's tasks from work I did last week where I had to add how many checkouts succeeded versus how many failed and how they progressed through a funnel for internal data to know how things are doing. And I break it down into every task, even things as small as deploy it to prod, verify it's working on prod, right? That might seem obvious, but the thing is how many times I've seen it regularly throughout my career where things get deployed to prod, it breaks a bunch of stuff because people didn't verify that it didn't break stuff. And that's like an innocent mistake, I think, that happens. And especially when maybe you merged it and it ships like 3 days later and you've moved on to other things. But to me, it's like I really try to capture these things in small tasks, because if I know that I go pick up a piece of work, I break it down into like everything I think I need to do, and then that's a living list. I'll add things, I'll remove things, I'll add notes. Like you can see, just using token for now, discussed with Lee, could add a unique session idea if we need to. Like I talked about it and researched it, discussed it with someone, and then added a note and checked it off, right? So I go back and I can remember, oh, that's why we didn't do that. But I start with like understanding the tools that we're using. Like that seems obvious, I would need to do that in order to do the work, but it just really helps me to know. And then when I take a break, or if I do get interrupted, I go back to my list and go, oh yeah, that's where I was. That's where I was left off. This is like, if anything in this is like a small hack, like a life hack thing, it's this. It's like break down things into small tasks, even if they're obvious, even if they're trivial, and follow that list. It helps you be so thorough, and I think it really improves the quality of the work. You got to take notes and you got to document things. That is so major, because you can't remember it all, right? Especially when it comes to being a programmer, there's like all these commands and obscure things, and oh yeah, we only have to do that once every 4 months, and you need an internal system for your team or for yourself where you take notes and you document things, and you have to make it easy to find. I think that's just major, and makes a huge difference. If you aren't doing that already, just start doing it, and see, have this like internal knowledge base. See how that helps you. When it comes to doing your best work, boredom is detrimental. For myself and seeing colleagues and teammates, is that when they are bored, they are unhappy, they are like existentially unsure about like what they're doing, why they're doing it. And that's good to ask those big questions sometimes. But if you're just bored and you're doing the same thing and it's rote and you're sort of like, why am I here? Why am I doing this? It eats away at you. And not only does it sort of your growth individually and like, sort of flatten out and you hit this plateau, but it's like pretty rough for a career because of how quickly technology moves, that if you're not kind of like keeping your skills sharp, 5 years can go by and the entire landscape has changed. Like, oh, NPM exists, and oh, CoffeeScript isn't really a thing anymore, and that people use, or oh, Backbone JS is like, what's Backbone? Like things change so rapidly. Oh, Angular's gone. Especially on the front end for web tooling, things change so quick. Not that you have to keep up with everything daily, but like if you stagnate and become bored, I think you're not going to do your best work, obviously. So I think you have to be strategic about working with your manager and your teammates to work on things that are engaging and challenging, but you have enough support so that you're not floundering. Because if you're working too far above your skills and where you're able to work without enough support, you're going to be frustrated, and that's like the opposite of boredom, is like extreme frustration. So it's like you're bored, you know how to do this like the back of your hand. That happens with some tasks you have to do. The other side is like, I don't even know what I'm supposed to do next and how to go about it. Or I don't even know what I'm supposed to Google to like figure out what this is. So those are two things, I guess, to be aware of. But watch out for boredom. Read and study about things other than programming. You got to be well-rounded, especially when it comes to like product management and product thinking. Like that can be valuable to read about and understand. Things about like personal productivity and that sort of stuff. I think even zoomed out a little bit more of like humanities and history and even fiction too, right? Like read and study things and have other interests than programming, and like try to view programming and like what you're building through the lens of humanity and what you're building and how it impacts other humans, because otherwise it can get really easy to just think about like you're in this world that you've created and you're not thinking outside of it. And it's important to be well-rounded. But also study programming, right? Like there have been definitely times in my career where I take a break from programming and studying it and reading it, and I need to like step back and have a little space from it. Like maybe the fire has sort of dwindled a little bit, and that's okay. But I still try to do that daily learning. And then there are other times where I want to learn a new language or a new framework or learn how to do something I don't know how to do. And studying programming really helps. Like, you'll do better work. Like, as the work you're doing gets more and more boring, you'll take on more challenging work. In order to take on the challenging work, you need to study and grow. So it's this cycle of supporting and growing yourself. And that is really important to doing your best work. And have some place to be outside of work, right? Especially if you're younger. Like, I remember, this is like a slightly embarrassing story. I had a job earlier in my career. It was like a small company, a little startup. And I remember going to my manager and I was really upset and frustrated. And I said something like, this is my life. This job is my life. I don't have anything else. I don't have a family. I don't have kids. I don't have this or that, right? Like, this is the thing I care about. And like, this is unacceptable. And I was really frustrated and upset. And at the time, that seemed like, oh yeah, I'm really committing myself to this work and I care about it and I want it to be the best it can be because it's like the main thing I have in my life is this job I go to and really pour myself into. And in hindsight, not only is that embarrassing, but it's like, as I've grown older, I actually do better work when I have other things I need to do. So if I need to go take care of an errand or go do this or that or work on another project of mine or whatever it is, right? Take care of my family, that kind of thing. I'm constrained. And when I embrace those constraints, I do better work because I'm like, I know I have to get this done. How can I do that? And so I have some other place to be, whether it's going for a hike or whatever it is, right? Like, have other things in your life other than programming and your job because otherwise you can get lost in it. Now, the flip side to that is don't have too many places to be. If you have too much on your plate, you have to run too many errands and you're going here and there and you don't have enough time to actually do that deep work and focus and you're distracted and your phone's going off and all this stuff, you're going to really suffer and it's going to be really difficult. So with all this stuff, there's a balance to it. Now, your life changes, your job changes, your work changes. You have to be open to trying new things, new systems, and really analyze and reflect honestly on how things are going. Because that's the only way you're going to evolve and change. Like, a system that worked 2 years ago might not work for you today, and a system that works for you today might not work for you 3 years in the future when X, Y, and Z change. So, we're in a constant state of change, and that's a really lame thing I just said, but it feels true, and you have to be in touch with yourself and how you feel and how your work's going and how it's treating you. Because how I generally think about it is if I'm not happy with my work and what I'm doing, then there's something really wrong, either with the job and my employer or with myself, or there's something off, and I have to try something different. So be unafraid to try new things, experiment, learn, and reflect, and see how that goes. Here are the 3 books I would read that really have impacted me and influenced myself on this stuff. These are like books that have really shaped my thoughts on working and productivity and whatever. So the first one is Getting Things Done by David Allen. This goes back to the GTD system where he lays out an entire approach to thinking about work and getting things done. It's in the name, obviously. It can be unappealing to have this old white guy on the cover and he's got business talk and speak and stuff, and it can be off-putting, right? I realize that. But the thing is that it's so immensely valuable and helpful, especially when it comes to working individually. When it comes to working as a team, a lot of the concepts of GTD still apply, but it's not as clear. But for the work you do as an individual I really like GTD. I really think it's helpful. It's really helped me, I guess is what I can say. So GTD. Also, I think it's a quick read. The audiobook's good too. But go through it, apply it, try it. You got to stick with it. That's the thing, right? It's not you download this app and everything's better. The app or the system, the tools you use to implement the system are not as important as the system itself and adhering to the tenets of it. So GTD. Second one, Deep Work by Cal Newport. This is about doing really focused work and the value of it and how, just it's a frame of mind for thinking about that. I really like that book. It's really readable. Atomic Habits. This is it's a good book. It's a fine book. I'm not a super habit person. I don't I like a little bit of looseness and goosiness and things, but what happens is just like brushing your teeth or whatever, like there are certain things, especially when programming, where it just becomes a habit and you just do it. And this book really can help set you up to do those things. So I like Atomic Habits. Even if I think these were in the order I would read them. I would read GTD, Deep Work, Atomic Habits in that order. And then if you want something different, Back to Work is a really great podcast. Merlin Mann and Dan Benjamin. Dan Benjamin is like a software developer and podcaster. Merlin used to be this productivity kind of expert, loosely. It's just a funny phrase, but now he's a podcaster, and but Merlin really has a lot to say about GTD and applying it, and it's sort of through this like knowledge worker focus. So Back to Work's really great. I would just start at the beginning, and those earlier episodes are a lot more focused on the like core of it, but there's so much good stuff in Back to Work. My coworker Brian introduced me to Back to Work, and it's just been a staple, and Merlin's work. So that's what I would read. That's what I would do following this video. I would read these things. I would reflect on what I've said, which is just really about you do your best work when you have no distractions, you're focused, you're enjoying yourself, you're working on work that's challenging but not too challenging, and if you have teammates, then you're working with them and supporting them, and like you're in this journey together. So I hope that helped. I enjoy talking about this stuff, and best of luck. See you next time. Thanks. Bye.